The first time I saw the drill sergeant's eyes on me, I knew I was in trouble. "Private Thompson!" Sergeant Miller barked, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. The entire barracks fell into a suffocating silence. I could feel the sweat start to form on my brow, but I couldn't move. My boots were too tight, my legs too stiff. I was the new guy, the oldest one in the platoon, and it was clear I didn't belong here. "You think you're ready for this, Thompson? You think you can hack it?" Sergeant Miller's voice boomed, the entire room hanging on his every word. His eyes didn't leave mine as he stalked forward, the sound of his boots pounding against the floor. "You're too damn old for this, and you're too slow, too weak." He spat the words like they were a personal insult, something he'd rehearsed in front of a mirror 100 times. I stood tall, shoulders back, though every inch of me screamed to shrink away. But then he hit me with the worst one. "You're a liability to this team, Private. You're going to drag everyone down. Just wait and see." The words rang in my ears long after the drill sergeant had moved on to the next poor soul. The other recruits were snickering, eyes darting between me and each other, waiting for me to break. But I didn't. I couldn't. Not with all the years I'd spent getting to this moment. This was my shot, and I'd be damned if I let him break me now. As the drill continued, my legs burned, my body screamed for a break, but I kept pushing, faster, harder, trying to make up for the years I'd missed. I wasn't a kid anymore, but I wasn't going to let that define me, not today. I thought that was the end of it, but then came chow time. The mess hall was louder than I expected. The noise echoed off the walls, plates clattering, soldiers shouting at each other in cadence. It was supposed to be a break, but it didn't feel like one. I took my tray and sat down, trying to blend into the crowd. The last thing I needed was more attention. But I didn't blend. Not here. I wasn't one of them. "Hey, old man," came the voice of Private Hudson, the kid who thought he knew everything. He was half my age and twice my size. He threw a half smirk my way before continuing. "How's the back holding up? You gonna need a wheelchair to get through the next drill?" The others at the table snickered, their eyes darting over to me like I was some kind of joke they hadn't fully gotten yet. I felt my face flush, the heat rising, in my neck. I was already on edge from Miller's words, and now this kid thought he could push me around in front of everyone. But I didn't respond. I just took a bite of my food and forced myself to swallow. Silence. That was the only thing I had left. But then something unexpected happened. From the corner of my eye, I caught Corporal Ramirez watching me. He didn't say anything, but there was something in his eyes. Maybe it was sympathy. Maybe it was pity. I wasn't sure. But the way he looked at me was different. He wasn't laughing. He wasn't mocking. It was like he saw something in me that no one else did. And for just a split second, that gave me a sliver of hope. But it wasn't enough to quiet the voice inside my head, the one that reminded me how alone I was here, how out of place I felt in this uniform, these boots, this life. Everyone else was built for this. They had the youth, the speed, the natural stamina. I had experience. That was about it. And experience didn't help me when we hit the obstacle course the next day. I was already behind before the first hurdle, already struggling to keep pace. The younger recruits shot ahead like rabbits, their feet light on the ground, their bodies springing over every obstacle. And there I was, clumsy, slow, my old knees creaking with every jump. Sergeant Miller was behind me, his voice a constant whip in the air, snapping insults at me as if I were the only one on the course. "You think this is a game, Thompson? You're a disgrace to this uniform." By the time I reached the final stretch, I could hear the others cheering. The race was over for them. They were already packing up, ready for the next drill. But I hadn't finished yet, and I knew it was only a matter of time before Miller showed up with his next round of verbal punishment. The crowd had gathered, and I could feel the eyes on me. The air was thick with their expectations. "Just finished, Thompson," Sergeant Miller said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Maybe you'll surprise us." I didn't respond. I couldn't. I wasn't sure what was worse, his words or the way the others were looking at me. That mix of pity and mockery. I wanted to vanish, to run away and hide from all of it. But that wasn't what I did. Not anymore. Not with everything I'd fought for to get here. I didn't finish that obstacle course first. I didn't even finish second. But when I crossed the line, gasping for breath, I knew something had changed. Something inside me that I didn't even realize was there. I wasn't going to quit. Miller's laugh was sharp. "I'll give you this, Thompson. You've got guts." But that's not enough here. That's what he thought. What none of them knew, what even I hadn't fully understood yet, was that I wasn't here for their approval. I wasn't here to be the fastest or the strongest. I was here to prove I belonged. What I never expected was the look Ramirez gave me after I finished. It wasn't a smirk, wasn't pity, just a nod, a small, silent acknowledgement. Maybe I wasn't invisible after all. Maybe this fight was far from over, and I knew in that moment, no matter how hard it got, I wasn't backing down. Not now. If this story resonates with you, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next chapters of this journey. The days dragged on, each one blurring into the next. I kept my head down, kept my focus. I'd been in the Army for a month now, and I had learned that the only thing that mattered was getting through the next drill, the next test. If you could do that, you could survive here, and I was determined to survive. The guys in my platoon were still laughing behind my back, still calling me the old man, or cracking jokes about how I didn't belong. But the jokes were quieter now, like they weren't sure if they should keep mocking me, or if they had to actually take me seriously. Still, none of them cared enough to step up and offer help. They just watched, except for Ramirez. He had started to notice the little things, the way I kept pushing myself, the way I wouldn't back down no matter how hard things got. I didn't get a lot of sleep in the barracks. Everyone was always talking about their families or their hometowns, and I didn't feel like I belonged in those conversations. My family was miles away, and there was no point in bringing them up. I was here to do one thing, make it through. So I kept going. The first few weeks of training were rough. My legs burned from all the sprints. My arms ached from the endless push-ups and pull-ups. I could hear Miller's voice in my head all the time, telling me I wasn't good enough. I was too old, too slow. The same words he'd said the day I'd arrived. It haunted me, but I never let it show. Not on the outside. I knew if I gave them a crack, they'd break me wide open, and I wasn't going to let that happen. Not here. Not now. One night, we were all sitting in the mess hall, scraping the bottom of our trays when Hudson shot me a nasty look across the table. He was just waiting for me to mess up so he could laugh, but tonight I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction. I had learned how to keep my face blank, how to swallow my pride and just get through it. "Hey, old man," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "What's it like having your knees fall apart every time you move?" The other recruits chuckled. I could feel their eyes on me, waiting for me to crack. I just stared down at my plate, keeping my breathing steady. I wasn't going to give him the pleasure of seeing me react, but Ramirez, who was sitting next to me, shifted in his seat. He didn't say anything, but he looked at Hudson, then at me, and I could see something in his eyes. Maybe it was sympathy. Maybe it was a kind of respect I hadn't earned yet. Hudson's grin faded as he noticed Ramirez's stare, but he didn't stop. "You gonna cry, Thompson? Come on, you're already a liability. Just admit it." It hit me harder than it should have. I wanted to snap back, to tell him what I really thought, but I just clenched my jaw and forced myself to stay calm. I was tired of being the joke, tired of being the target, but I knew if I let that out, if I let that anger show, it would only make it worse. I kept quiet, finished my meal, and left without saying a word. That's the thing about this place. No one really talks about the hurt. You just keep your head down and push through it. And maybe that's the hardest part of all. The loneliness. The feeling that no matter how hard you try, you're never going to fit in. The next day we were supposed to do the timed ruck march. I could feel the weight of the pack on my back even before we started. It was heavy, too heavy, and I could already hear the mockery in my head. I wasn't going to make it, not with the rest of them. As we lined up for the start, I could see Miller's eyes scanning the group, looking for anyone to pick on, and when his gaze landed on me, I knew what was coming. He waited until we were all packed in, our boots lined up in perfect formation, and then he walked down the row. Thompson, he barked. You ready for this? Or are you going to slow the whole damn group down again? My heart dropped. I just nodded, trying to keep my face neutral. But the weight of his words, it was like being back on that first day when I was still a stranger in this place. The march started, and for the first few miles I struggled. Even my legs felt like they were on fire, my lungs burning with every breath. I could feel everyone passing me by, their strides long and steady. And then there was me, dragging behind. But I wasn't going to stop. Not today. I could hear the whispers, the quiet laughter, but I drowned it out. One step, then another. I focused on the rhythm of my breathing, the sound of my boots hitting the dirt, the sting of sweat in my eyes. It hurt, but I kept going. Around the third mile I stumbled. My legs buckled under the weight of the pack, and I almost collapsed to the ground. I heard someone shout, "Come on, Thompson, keep up." But I couldn't keep up. I was falling behind, and I knew I was letting everyone down. And then just when I thought I couldn't go any further, I felt a hand on my shoulder. Ramirez. "Come on, old man," he said, his voice low but steady. "I'll help you." Without a word, he reached for my pack, adjusting it so it didn't drag so much. We fell into step together, and for the first time since I'd been here, I wasn't alone in this fight. Ramirez didn't have to help me. He could have kept his distance, just like everyone else. But he didn't. The last few miles felt like they took forever. But with Ramirez's help, I kept moving, one step, then another. And when we crossed the finish line, we weren't first, but we weren't last either. Miller was standing at the finish line, waiting for us. His eyes scanned the group, but when they landed on me, they were different. There was no mockery this time, no ridicule. "You finished, Thompson," he said, his voice softer than it had ever been. "I didn't think you had it in you." I didn't respond. I just nodded, trying to catch my breath. But Ramirez gave me a small smile, a look of quiet approval, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I belonged. If this story resonates with you, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next chapters of this journey. The sun hadn't even come up when we were already marching. The air was thick with humidity, the weight of the gear on my back nearly unbearable. But there was no time to think about that. There was only the drill, the next obstacle, the next test. We were on a field day, basically a series of grueling physical challenges designed to break you down and rebuild you. And after everything that had happened, I wasn't going to let it break me. The day started like any other, with Miller barking commands, pushing us faster, harder, and farther than any of us thought we could go. But this time, there was something different. It was as if the entire platoon knew it was my moment to prove something. They'd seen me drag my way through the last few weeks, struggling to keep up, failing in front of everyone. But this was it. This was the day I had to show them, show myself, that I belonged here. Miller was relentless. As we ran, he'd yell, "Come on, Thompson. I thought you'd be done by now. You're slowing everyone down. You'll never make it." The others were quiet, but I could hear their shoes hitting the ground, all of them faster than me, pulling ahead with ease. The sweat was already stinging my eyes. I felt my breath coming in ragged gasps, my legs screaming at me to stop. But I didn't. I kept my eyes on the ground ahead, focusing on each step. The last thing I needed was to hear Miller's taunts or see those looks from the others. Then it happened. Just as I was pushing through the last stretch, my foot caught on a rock. It wasn't just a stumble, it was a full-on fall. My knees hit the ground hard, the weight of the pack forcing me to crash forward. My face scraped against the dirt, and for a second I just lay there not moving. The pain was sharp, but it was nothing compared to the sting of failure. "Get up, Thompson! Don't just lay there like a damn rag doll," Miller yelled from the front. The others passed me by, their eyes flicking to me with that familiar mix of pity and mockery. I could hear Hudson's voice, his voice rising with laughter. "That's what you get for being slow, old man." But the thing was, I couldn't get up. Not yet. I just lay there feeling like the weight of everything had crushed me. I wanted to quit. I wanted to walk off and never come back. But then something clicked. Maybe it was the voice inside me that refused to give up. Maybe it was the thought of my son Tyler, back home, waiting for me to prove that I could do this. I had to get up. For me. For him. Slowly, painfully, I pushed myself off the ground, ignoring the ache in my bones. I wiped the dirt from my face, stood tall again, and started walking. Slowly at first, but with each step I pushed harder, determined to finish. The others had passed me, and Miller's voice was fading behind me, but it didn't matter anymore. I wasn't going to let them decide what I could and couldn't do. By the time I reached the end of the course, I was the last one. The others were, already sitting in the shade resting, but I didn't stop. I didn't even glance at them. I just kept walking, one step after another. And when I crossed the finish line, it wasn't a victory. It wasn't even close to the top. But it was mine. I'd finished. I hadn't quit. Miller didn't even acknowledge me at first. He was too busy barking orders at the others. But I caught a glimpse of him watching me from the corner of his eye. There was something in that look, something that made my heart race. Was it respect, or was it just curiosity? Maybe he was waiting for me to collapse again. When the drill was finally over, we all headed back to the barracks. I didn't say anything. I didn't look at anyone. I just went through the motions, the familiar routine of cleaning up, putting my boots in perfect order, and getting into my bunk. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was different. Something had changed today. Maybe it was the way the others looked at me, or the way I carried myself. I didn't know yet, but I could feel it. The next day, during a live fire drill, everything changed. We were out in the field, lined up, all of us behind barricades, and the sergeant was walking us through the procedure. I'd barely had time to get my gear on when it happened. One of the recruits, Private Daniels, tripped. His foot caught on the wrong side of the barrier, and he went down hard, his rifle slipping out of his hands. In the chaos that followed, he didn't notice a second round of simulated fire coming right at him. He was exposed. Everyone froze. I heard someone shout his name, but the seconds felt like hours. I was the closest to him. Without thinking, I darted out of my position, grabbing Daniels by the collar and pulling him down behind cover. The bullets whizzed by my head, the sound sharp in the air, but all I could think about was getting him to safety. I didn't care about the risk. I didn't care about the drill. The only thing that mattered was getting him out of the line of fire. When we finally got back behind cover, I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. I'd just saved his life. It was instinct, pure, raw instinct. I hadn't thought about it. I hadn't hesitated. I just moved. The drill sergeant was the first one to speak. His voice was quiet, but there was a noticeable shift in his tone. Thompson, you actually did something right for once. It wasn't much, but it was enough. For a second, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't invisible to him anymore. But it didn't end there. As we all packed up to head back to base, Miller pulled me aside. I was expecting the usual insult, the lecture about how I needed to try harder. But when he spoke, it wasn't what I thought. You saved him, Thompson, he said, his voice soft. You saved Daniels. I just nodded, unsure of what to say. You showed me something today. You might just make it through this after all. It wasn't a compliment exactly, but it was as close as I was going to get. That night, as we sat in the barracks, the tension in the room was different. The other soldiers weren't laughing at me anymore. They were watching me. Maybe they saw what I could do. Maybe they didn't. But I knew one thing for sure. I'd earned their attention. And for the first time since I'd gotten here, I felt like I belonged. Ramirez caught my eye across the room, and he gave me a quick nod. It was subtle, but it meant something. He hadn't forgotten that I'd helped him on the ruck march. He hadn't forgotten that I was still here. It wasn't a victory yet, but it was a start. And that was enough for me. If this story resonates with you, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next chapters of this journey. The tension in the barracks was palpable. Everyone was talking about the last mission, how we'd survived the impossible odds and came out the other side. But me, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It wasn't about the mission. It wasn't about the success. It was about how everything had changed in the blink of an eye. I wasn't the underdog anymore. I wasn't the one who was always failing. Something in me had shifted. And now, it seemed like everyone else was starting to notice. I was in the mess hall when it happened. The usual group was sitting together, and I was trying to keep my head down, not draw too much attention to myself. But then I heard it. Hudson's voice, loud as ever, cutting through the noise. "Hey, Thompson, you actually did something right out there. You didn't completely screw it up. I guess you're not as useless as I thought." The whole table went silent, like they were waiting for me to react. But I didn't. I just kept eating. His words were like a slap in the face, but I wasn't going to let him see how much they hurt. I'd come too far to let it break me now. The old me would have lashed out, would have made a scene, but not now. Now I was in control. Ramirez, who'd been quiet all through the meal, shot me a look. It wasn't sympathy. It wasn't pity. It was something else. Respect. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't invisible to him anymore, and that made all the difference. The rest of the meal passed in a blur, but there was a heaviness in the air, a tension I couldn't shake. Hudson's words kept replaying in my head. He hadn't just mocked me, he'd acknowledged me, and that was what hurt the most. The fact that I wasn't just the old guy anymore. I was the guy who'd done something right. I was the guy who'd survived. The next day, we had another training exercise. This one was different. It was about teamwork, communication, and trust. We were paired up for a series of tasks, and I got stuck with Hudson. Of all people. He was the last person I wanted to be with. He'd made my life miserable since day one. But this wasn't about me anymore. It was about doing the job, about getting through it. So I kept my mouth shut and followed his lead. The first task was simple enough. Retrieve an item from a simulated enemy position, using only our gear and communication skills. I knew it was a test of trust, of teamwork. But Hudson wasn't making it easy. He was barking orders at me, telling me what to do before I even had a chance to think. "Thompson, you're slow. Move faster," he snapped, his voice harsh and impatient. I bit my tongue and followed his commands, but inside I was seething. I wanted to shove him aside and do it myself. I wanted to prove I could handle it without his help, but I didn't. I stuck to the plan. I stuck to him. And when we finally reached the target area, I could see the hesitation in his eyes. He'd underestimated me. He was still waiting for me to screw it up, but this time I didn't. We retrieved the item, got back to base, and completed the task. As we walked back, Hudson was quieter than usual. For a second, I thought maybe he was about to say something, maybe even acknowledge what had just happened. But he didn't. Instead, he just walked ahead, as if nothing had changed. That's when I realized it wasn't about him acknowledging me. It wasn't about proving him wrong. It was about proving something to myself. I didn't need his approval. I didn't need anyone's approval. I just needed to keep moving forward. The rest of the day passed without incident. We went through more drills, more exercises, but something was different. I could feel the shift, the way people were looking at me, the way they treated me. It wasn't pity anymore. It wasn't mockery. It was respect. The turning point came during a live fire exercise. This time it wasn't a drill. It was real. We were out in the field on the edge of enemy territory, simulating a mission gone wrong. The sergeant had given us orders, and we were supposed to move in a tight formation. But as we moved forward, something went wrong. I didn't know what happened, but suddenly there was a loud crack, and the ground beneath us exploded. It was the sound of an IED, simulated of course, but it felt real. Everything happened at once. People were scrambling, diving for cover, shouting orders, trying to make sense of the chaos. And there in the middle of it was Hudson. He was stuck, pinned down, unable to move. His legs were tangled in the wires and he was yelling for help. But the situation was too dangerous. We couldn't get to him without exposing ourselves. I didn't think. I just reacted. I crawled forward, moving as fast as I could, ignoring the shouts of the sergeant, the chaos around me. I reached Hudson and pulled him free, dragging him out of the danger zone with every ounce of strength I had left. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't graceful, but it didn't matter. I got him out. We finally made it back to safety, and the sergeant called us together. Everyone was silent, watching. Hudson was covered in dirt, but he was alive, and I had saved him. The sergeant looked at me for a long time, his eyes searching my face. Then he turned to the group. Thompson, you did good out there. You've earned your place. It wasn't much, but it was enough. For the first time, I wasn't the joke. I wasn't the weak link. I was part of the team. And that was all I'd ever wanted. Later that night, when the adrenaline had worn off, I found Ramirez in the barracks. He didn't say anything at first. He just gave me that nod again. And this time I nodded back. Things were different now. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about proving to myself that I could be more than what they'd all thought I was. And in that moment, I knew I had. The next day, Hudson pulled me aside. His voice was quieter now, more respectful. Thompson, I owe you one. You saved my ass back there. I didn't say anything. I just looked at him, because I didn't need his apology. I didn't need his gratitude. I had already proven to myself what I was capable of. If this story resonates with you, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next chapters of this journey. It had been months since I first stepped foot in this place, and I'd changed more than I could have ever imagined. The insults, the ridicule, the constant push to prove myself. They still lingered, but now they didn't define me. I was different, and so was the way the others looked at me. I wasn't just the old man anymore. I wasn't the one who lagged behind. I had earned my place. It was late one night after a particularly grueling drill when I found myself sitting alone in the barracks. The lights were dim, and the usual sounds of chatter had quieted. Everyone was either asleep or pretending to be, but my mind was still racing. It had been a long road, but here I was. No longer the underdog, no longer the weakest link. I had proven myself. The door opened with a quiet creak, and I looked up. It was Sergeant Miller, the last person I expected to see, especially at this hour. He stood there for a moment, eyes scanning the room before landing on me. Thompson, he said, his voice different from the usual harsh bark. It was quieter now, almost contemplative. I didn't say anything. I just nodded, unsure of what was coming. I didn't need any more words from him, especially after everything we'd been through. Miller stepped inside, closing the door behind him. He didn't sit down, just stood there for a moment, like he was weighing his next words carefully. I could feel the tension in the air. Something was coming, something important. You've earned my respect, he finally said, his words cutting through the silence. It was like the weight of those words hung in the air, and I wasn't sure how to respond. I didn't need to hear that. I had already known I'd earned my place, but there was something in his tone that made me hesitate. This wasn't just about respect. It was something more. I've been hard on you, he continued, his voice steady but filled with an honesty I hadn't expected. And I was wrong. I treated you like you didn't belong, like you were weak. But you've shown me otherwise. I didn't know what to say to that. The past months had been a constant struggle to prove myself, to push past every obstacle that was thrown at me. And now here he was, acknowledging that. It was hard to swallow, harder than I thought it would be. He sighed, looking away for a moment before locking eyes with me again. You've done something that not many people in this place can do. You've earned your spot here with your grit. You never back down, not once, and that's something I respect. For a second, I thought I might finally get the apology I'd been waiting for, the one that would make all the suffering worth it. But there was no apology. It wasn't needed. This wasn't about me getting validation anymore. It was about something bigger than that. Miller gave me a single nod, then turned to leave. But before he walked out, he paused. Just remember, Thompson, he said almost under his breath, it's not the ones who look the part that make a difference. It's the ones who do what's necessary. And you did that. I sat there stunned as the door clicked shut behind him. For the first time, it felt like everything had come full circle. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I had become part of something bigger, something that didn't require approval or acknowledgement to matter. Later that night, I found myself standing in front of the flag, just looking at it. The way it waved, so steady and strong, it reminded me of why I was here. Not for anyone else's approval, not to prove them wrong, but because I had something to prove to myself. Ramirez came up beside me, his footsteps soft on the floor. He didn't say anything at first, just stood next to me, his eyes following mine as we both stared at the flag. "You've come a long way, Thompson," he said quietly, almost like he was speaking to himself. I nodded, not knowing how to respond. We'd both been through this together, in our own ways, and for a moment there was nothing else to say. In the silence, I felt something settle inside me. It wasn't relief exactly. It wasn't even pride. It was something simpler, something that said, "This is where I belong. This is who I am now." And just like that, I realized this journey, this fight, it wasn't about any one moment. It wasn't about proving a point to the others or winning their respect. It was about the strength that had come from everything that had pushed me to the edge. It was about resilience, about brotherhood, about knowing who I was, even when no one else did. The next morning we lined up for inspection. As we stood there, the same routine as always, I felt different. I wasn't the last in line anymore. I wasn't the one who was held back. I was a part of this. And that, more than anything, was enough. If this story resonates with you, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel, so you won't miss the next chapters of this journey. The final morning came, quiet and still. The sun barely touched the horizon, casting a faint glow over the base. We stood in formation, the cool wind rustling the flags above us. As we lined up, I could feel the eyes of the men on me. Men I'd once thought would never see me as anything more than the old guy. Now it was different. They stood tall, shoulders square, faces calm. But something had shifted. I wasn't the one who lagged behind anymore. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw him, Sergeant Miller. He was walking past, stopping in front of me. The same drill sergeant who'd mocked me, who'd pushed me to the edge and beyond. But today he didn't sneer. He didn't bark. He just looked at me, his gaze steady and unwavering, before nodding once, respectfully, silently. It was all the acknowledgement I needed. As the wind whipped past, I stood there beneath the American flag, eyes steady, my heart full. I'd come a long way, not for anyone else, but for me, for the brothers beside me, for the pride of knowing that I had earned my place. What I've learned in this journey is simple. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. The ridicule, the failures, they were tests. Every obstacle was an opportunity to show what I was made of. You don't need anyone's approval to find your worth. Actions speak louder than words, and it's in the moments when no one's looking that you build the strength that really counts. We all face struggles, some harder than others. But remember this, resilience doesn't come from the easy days. It comes from the ones that break you and teach you to rise again. If you've ever faced doubts, if you've ever been counted out, share your story with us in the comments. Let us hear about the battles you fought and the strength you found. And if this story resonated with you, don't forget to hit the like button to show your support. Subscribe for more, and let's keep this community strong, together like brothers in arms. Stay strong, stay resilient, and never stop moving forward.